We all need breaks, and that need increases as our children get older and have graduated out of the school system. Whether it's for a few respite hours or full-time care in a living facility, caregivers are an integral part of our lives as parents. But how do we find the good ones? That is one of many questions I'll be discussing with my guest today, Mackenzie Frost, a branch manager from Serengeti, a caregiver provider agency. And we're going to be talking about many things in regards to finding a great caregiver. Welcome, Mackenzie.
Thank you for having me, Betsy.
I'm super happy to know you. For those who don't know, I work in a shared office space, and Mackenzie is one of the gals in our group. And I was so excited when I got to know her background because caregiving agencies in general have really had a bad rap in the past, and now they're starting to. I think what they're doing is they're finally identifying what so many of the struggles are, and they're looking for ways to bring a lot more ease to it. So I'm feeling very confident because I see you don't look frantic during your days. I will say that firsthand. So I'm assuming there's a lot of calm in your life, or you just choose to create it. 'Cause
I have to choose to create it. My life is chaos most of the time, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
okay, amazing. That's what I like to hear. Okay, so caregivers. Um, you know that this is a podcast about autism, so we're specifically
Yeah.
going to be talking about autism caregivers
Yeah.
here. Despite the fact that the state likes us to kind of put them all in one particular category. And it's been a challenge because if a caregiver gets licensed in our state, they also have to go with instruction on how to put in a catheter and how to, change the bedding of somebody so they don't get bed sores. And these are not our issues.
No.
So a lot of people don't want to have to go through the rigmarole of getting certified when it doesn't seem like the system really is recognizing or identifying that there are different kinds of caregivers. What do you see in your business with that?
So I actually see that all the time. People are getting trained to become a home care aide, and they're learning things like how to dress somebody with a weak side, how to reposition somebody, how to do range of motion. When in reality, that's not what a lot of these people that we are signing on for care needs. A lot of these people need transportation, whether that's
Mhm.
to appointments, activities. They want to get out and exercise. They want to go out and do their own grocery shopping and
Right.
stop ordering from Instacart, DoorDash all the time. They
Right.
need that transportation is huge
Yeah.
for caregivers.
That is big. And yes, that's it. So now I'm assuming you're serving all different kinds of people with caregiver needs.
Yes.
So
Yep.
now you have this agency, and I am super interested for qualities that you look for in an autism caregiver versus maybe somebody who is in a convalescent situation where they're trying to rebuild their strength again.
Yeah.
What are you looking for specifically?
So when we are interviewing our caregivers, that we don't just ask them what their background is. We want to know what their hobbies are too. We want to know, what do they like to do when they're off work? Do they like to go on hikes? Do they like to crochet? What are their hobbies? And that's how we like to pair our caregivers with our clients. Our client assessments look a lot different than most caregiving companies because we want to make it as personal as possible. So we want to know, where do these people like to go? Do they have any favorite parks they go to? Do they
I
have any
love
favorite
that.
restaurants? So that is some of like the top questions that I ask when I'm doing an assessment. Obviously, I need to know what their care needs are too, but I want to know more about their personality. I want to know what TV shows they watch, if any, what kind of books they like to read. And then when we're interviewing caregivers, we ask those same types of questions. So we're able to make that fit on a more personal level and find these clients a caregiver that not only are they going to be able to provide the care, but they're going to like and enjoy spending time together, which is the most important part of it in my eyes.
When it comes to the training, um, I, I, I have to say that when I look back at the past of all the caregivers, and I've had a lot of caregivers. I mean, Joey's 32, so we've had a lot of caregivers in our life. When I look back at them, the ones that were trained, like I had already been a
Mhm.
caregiver, or maybe they worked in the school system, were not necessarily my best caregivers. I'm not saying that they weren't, they often
Yeah.
were very good, but I have always been more willing to train from start rather than to try to find somebody with vast experience. Do you find that as
Mhm.
well?
Oh, absolutely. And thankfully, Serengeti offers the training program. So we go through an online program called Relias to put these caregivers that have no experience through the training program. And I think it's a lot easier if somebody comes from an assisted living or even a rehab facility and they're switching to one on one care. Oh, it's so different. If somebody is starting out doing one on one care, honestly, those are typically my best caregivers.
Yeah, exactly. They can be.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And especially if and I love what you're saying, where you're matching the hobbies and
Yeah.
matching the interest, because that does make a big difference. Now,
Mhm.
here's something I want to add to that, because as Joey has gotten older, and now that he's a speller, and Mackenzie knows Joey, um,
Mhm.
he, he he is so no, he's not who I thought he was. I mean, his personality is not what I thought, not and nothing that I would have expected. And there's some parts of him that I recognize and who I've seen grown up, but there's a lot of parts of him that I haven't recognized. Quite often, parents will choose a caregiver that they like more than their child will.
Yeah.
And they're looking for qualities, and I'm not saying that you don't wanna be safe or careful about things like that, but I actually have hired caregivers that have gone through who have, gone through AA. I've
Mhm.
gone
Yeah.
through some of those that have had a hard life. I'm not
Mhm.
looking for the perfection. I'm looking for somebody who's been tossed around a bit. And I will say what's super interesting is the ones that have had a little bit of a rough and tumble life tend to be the best with Joey's meltdowns.
Really? I really like to hear that because, we're all about giving people second chances too, as long as it's not like something disqualifying right off the bat.
Right.
We're all about giving second chances. If we do an interview with somebody and I just have that good feeling about them, if something comes back and we're like, "Oh, they might have had a problem in the past 30 years ago," sometimes those are still the best caregivers because
Right.
not only do they have experience with behaviors or what they've seen, on the streets or whatever it may be, they have experience. They've lived a life too that's not all rainbows and sunflowers.
And that's part of the issue, because when
Yeah.
Joey has a meltdown, he is very loud and he is potentially embarrassing to the person that is with him. The person that's with him, if they've never seen or experienced trauma in their life,
Mhm.
they are going to freeze and not know what to do.
Yeah.
Those caregivers that have that squeaky clean, straight A types of resumes
Yep.
tend to be like the first ones to break.
Yes. No, I 100% agree. And honestly, because my background is in memory care, I used to run
Ugh,
an assisted living and memory care facility. And those types of people were amazing in a facility. But I have brought some of those people that were amazing in the facility over to my home care, and they are just completely different.
y
And, it's not that they're a bad caregiver, it's that they are used to being so busy all the time, and in home care, with being with somebody one-on-one, it is a lot slower pace than a lot of people are used to.
yeah, absolutely. It can be
Yeah.
tremendous unless you're
It
with Joey. But
Yeah.
yes, 100%. I mean, it can be a lot slower pace, and that's so much the case for so many others, but then there's so many of our kids that are so hyperactive, very, very constantly on the move, elopers,
Mhm.
they need somebody who's quick and fast on their
Yeah.
feet. So all of this is great, and I know, by the way, it goes without saying, background checks.
We run a check on their I-9 and ID. So we have them fill out an I-9 at the interview with their social security card and their ID. And we check to see if they've ever been even accused of abuse, neglect, financial or sexual, exploitation, any type of abuse. If they have ever had an APS report on them, we will know before their background check even comes back. And then we also do very thorough background checks. So a lot of people, like, we run their background and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I was 13 years old. That is a stealing charge from when I was 13."
Right.
And they just never got it off their record.
Yes, and that happens as well too.
Yeah.
I interviewed somebody once, who was just such a great guy, and I loved it because he literally started the interview telling me the mistakes he's made in the past.
Mhm.
And I loved that he had the forthright to bring it up, assuming that I was gonna find out in one way
Yeah.
or capacity anyway, and he wanted to talk about it. He wanted to tell me what he had learned, what he had done wrong, and how he has changed his life because of it. And quite often, it's usually some sort of substance abuse or things in
Mhm.
that way.
Yeah.
And and I just respected him so much for just being
Mhm.
able to start the conversation with that rather than waiting for me to find out and then
Yeah.
asking about it later. Because I've had that as well too, where people have played a really good card, and then I
Yeah.
find out that they
Me
have
too.
lo yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go into as we're taking this experience running ads, and I certainly understand that you're doing this, and we're gonna talk about your agency at one point to talk about how people can get in touch with your agency, but as many people are listening to this today, they're not all gonna be going through an agency. Some of them are simply just
Yeah.
looking for a night out with their husband or wife, and they just are looking for an evening caregiver so that they can
Yeah.
take a break. What are some of the key I'm gonna give you my advice too, but I want your
Okay.
advice first on what are some of the key things you want to say in an advertisement to find that person?
So in the advertisements that we post to look for a caregiver, or if I was in your shoes?
Uh, in our shoes.
So in your shoes, I would be looking for somebody that has the background or, at least some experience dealing with some sort of behaviors. And what are they going to do if something does happen? They need to be patient. They need to have a good sense of humor and be very open-minded.
Right, right.
Mhm.
I
I think being open-minded is like top 3 for me because, you have to walk into these situations with an open mind. You
right.
have to know, if something happens, how am I gonna react? And that is one of the first questions I would be asking when you're doing the interviews too.
My I love that, thank you. My advice on it is to be specific, but to be really careful with what your specifics are, and let me explain but what I
Mhm.
mean by this is on the specific end of things, if you want somebody to watch videos with your child or play video games, you need to be specific about that in the ad. If you need them to heat up dinner versus start something from scratch, you need to be specific about that regarding
Yep,
if it's just, heating something up versus really being able to cook something. If you have a child like in Joey's situation who is very athletic and wants to take bike rides and walks and be out and about town, you need to be specific about that as well too.
yep,
The parts that that I feel that to let go of the specifics are what qualifications they have sh saying you need to have, like, a huge list of references, you need to have I mean,
mhm,
I'm not saying that that's not a good thing, but I also
yep,
feel like let go a little bit with trying to overqualify somebody and feel a little bit of trust. I think references are definitely an important part because you can learn a lot about somebody through that. But don't expect them to have this tremendous experience because many people are taking a job like this because they're trying to get experience. And let's
yeah,
face it, unless you're a multimillionaire and willing to pay $30 an hour, even $40 an hour, sometimes when I lived in San Francisco, $80 an hour. Like it what you are, you don't get your pick of the litter.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like you've you have to figure out where you're going to bend a little bit, where you're going to be a little bit
Mhm.
willing to not have the perfection that you want. But I do think that there is an area for specifics when it comes to like qualities that you're looking for. And I think you said earlier, somebody who's willing to go with the flow,
Yeah.
somebody who is not super tense. Um, I will tell you one person, type of person, Mackenzie, that I am starting to love to hire, that I've hired several of recently, and that is individuals who have autism themselves.
Yeah, we actually just had a conversation about this
I
like 2
know.
days ago, I think, and that was, you know, your feedback on that topic was amazing, and after talking to the guy, he just seemed so on top of things. He came in so prepared and
I know.
had questions, and I loved it.
So Mackenzie's referring to an individual who I hired as a caregiver, and I absolutely could, 'cause, from the very first interview, could recognize there were pieces of autism within
Mhm.
himself, and I think he speaks of that. He's not trying to hide that. If I were to spend a day with him, we probably wouldn't have a tremendous amount to talk about. But Joey, in his non-speaking world, who is looking for somebody who just shares interest and probably connects to him
Mhm.
on an energetic level, it
Yeah.
was perfection. Like, it was amazing because there's a certain understanding of behaviors that you don't have to explain to somebody. If you hire an adult with autism, you don't have to explain what sensory needs are and why
Yeah.
those loud pitches of a child screaming are going to bother them. Like, you have usually a bit of an understanding with that. On the flip side of that, individuals with autism can also really struggle with a meltdown. It might trigger a meltdown in themselves.
Mhm.
So that is something that is still to be cognizant of and wary of, is that going to make it harder on them if there is a meltdown situation? If that is the case, then I urge you to potentially work with them, but do it on small periods of time, not an
Yes.
entire day, a
Mhm.
couple of hours, because usually, as I know with Joey can usually keep it together for a couple of hours. And if he has to let go, let him let go when I get home or after
Yeah.
he gets back in my car or whatever it might be. But but don't discount the adults, the autistic adults out there, because I think they can be
Mhm.
phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody, you know, this is in my eyes, this is what I've experienced. People with autism as adults, they have their own talents and they're very creative and they know things that we don't, not only about themselves, but about the world. They see things in their own eyes, which is just so amazing to me. My nephew is actually autistic and he is the best drawer. He draws the coolest things that I don't even know where he gets these things, but it is just so creative and amazing.
So tell me, if you were hiring a caregiver for your nephew,
Yeah.
what would you put in the heading? Creative, artsy caregiver or something
If
like that?
For him, they would need to be creative. They would need to be very active. I think that they would need to be okay with kind of a little bit of roughhousing, not like too much, but he does play fight and he is, you know, he doesn't speak a lot. Most of his words are not clear.
Right.
So somebody that would need to read his faces and read his emotions and see, you know, is he lingering around over here? Does he need something? Because he's not going to tell you if he needs something.
Right.
He'll just kind of wander over to that area and hang out over there until somebody gets him what he wants.
And that's just all super important that I feel that in the title of, if you're making a caregiver ad for yourself, you
Yeah.
have to put in your title more than just caregiver.
Yes.
And people have heard me talk about, every time I do a caregiver role for Joey, I call it an adventure caregiver because I want this person to take him on adventures. But a
Yeah.
creative caregiver,
Mhm.
a fun caregiver, a compassionate caregiver, whatever the word is that describes what your child needs, put it in the title because I know that if I just put caregivers, most people are just going to pass by because there's so many ads for just caregiver. But if you
Yeah.
put something very specific in the title, it tends to catch people's eyes a little bit more.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe they'll have some background with having another client that
Right.
likes to adventure. If you put out their adventure caregiver, maybe somebody is like, oh, I have a client that I love to adventure with, or, somebody in their family that they can relate that to. I've seen a lot of different ads for another company on Indeed recently, and there's just private caregiver, in home caregiver, companion caregiver, and they're all for the same company, and I kind of questioned that at first, but now after hearing you say this, it makes a little bit more sense.
We have to.
So thanks for that.
You're welcome. I'm happy to help. All right, what qualities? This is something that I'm super interested in.
Okay.
And I'm hitting you with this question out of left field. So if you need some time to
Okay.
think about it, go ahead. What qualities surprise you as being some of the best caregivers?
Oh, it's always the ones that I think I'm kind of questioning. So they're kind of a little bit different. Whether that's personality, their humor may be a little bit different. They might have, some people have a very dry sense of humor
Mhm.
in my eyes because I'm very loud and all over the place. And then I've had people come in for an interview and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of questioning this one. He's kind of dry. I say he because I'm referring to somebody in my mind specifically. And then I put them with a client, and the client calls me up a couple days later and says, this is the best fit. I don't think you could have found a better fit than this.
I
I
love that.
also, another thing is I love my bubbly caregivers. I've got some very, very bubbly, funny caregivers that are all over the place, maybe a little bit of ADHD. I know I'm ADHD, so I can normally point it out pretty quickly. But I think those would be somebody that's able to adapt quickly, to, change.
Right.
Because a lot of people
It's
are,
that
this
is
is
so
brand new
true.
for so many people. And a lot of people in the home setting, they
Right.
can go from one thing to the next in the blink of an eye.
That's a very good point. That an ADHD person and okay, so then let's talk about accommodations that us as the parent or the primary caregiver, when we're hiring these individuals, let's talk about the accommodations we can give those individuals. For
Okay.
example, if I have a really super hard to follow a schedule ADD, ADHD caregiver, I am
Okay.
going to be very specific with my instructions. And
Yes.
by that, I mean when I need that person to do a bunch of things that day, I send it in a bullet list in a text. Because for two things, if you say it over the phone, or you leave a voice message and that person doesn't remember, you're going to
Mhm.
have a hard time proving you told them because they're going to
Yes.
say, they didn't tell me. Okay. So that's one. Number two,
That happens to me all the
yeah.
time. I'm just gonna point that out.
Yeah.
Text, emails work so much better for me
Right.
if it's multiple things because it goes in one ear, right out the other half the time.
The email I have
Mhm.
found with anyone younger than 30, maybe even 35, is like gone to the wayside. Most of my
Oh,
caregivers are not very good with emails. They're great with texting,
really?
but terrible with emails. Just an
Okay.
issue that I've had. So when I want to say something and I want to have record that I said it, I
Mhm.
do it that way. The other thing that has really helped is having a calendar that we both share, whether it's a Google Calendar or I actually do mine on Apple because my primary caregiver also has an Apple calendar. So we do it that way. so that everything is a visual of what days, what times are expected, and you can write notes within that. So
Mhm.
having an online shared calendar is also another big vital thing
That's a
to do.
great idea.
Um,
I like that.
I'm so happy that I'm helpful to you, Mackenzie.
Yeah, you totally are. I love it.
But the things that I'm always feeling very surprised that I like in a caregiver is somebody who doesn't get flustered by a meltdown. Like that's what I would say that is my number one thing, other than somebody who's very active, but somebody that can
Mhm.
handle it. Because I'll tell you one thing, every time I have hired a new caregiver, I don't even add them to my Rolodex of life yet. In other words, I haven't put them in the system. I haven't done anything until Joey's had a meltdown and I see if they're still around.
Yeah.
Because if Joey's not had a meltdown and you're flying high and everything's just really great, you still don't know my son. And
Yeah.
you are not going to be in marker in my life yet
Mhm.
until I know that you've lived through it. So
Yeah.
you almost in some situations want those meltdowns to happen early on so that you can assess,
Mhm.
are they able to hang on to that? Because I'm
Yeah.
guessing, Mackenzie, you've had a lot of people quit after a meltdown.
I just share something that I
Please, I want your
experienced like a
opinion.
week ago? This
Yes.
was last week. I have this amazing caregiver. She is very young, early 20s. I think she is 20. She is so good. Her background is with children like at the YMCA, and she is actually the receptionist at my husband's work, which was super ironic that she applied to be a caregiver. And when I met her, I just thought she had this great personality, and I ended up pairing her with a brother and sister, both on the spectrum. The sister, she has panic attacks at the thought of leaving the house. And the brother, he wants to be out of the house all day long. And
Oh,
she
yeah.
took him out the other day and on a bike ride, and he had a meltdown. He was done riding his bike. He shoved it into her car and kind of damaged a little bit. She was very upset in the moment, called me very upset afterwards. But you know what? I was kind of expecting, I didn't know what to expect with her. I was like, is this going to be like the end of it for them? She's dealt with some meltdowns before, but him damaging her personal property like that, I was like, is she going to pull through? And she did. And she went to work the next shift and she said, it went great. I'm not upset anymore. It's just one of those things,
I love that.
and I was proud of her. I was amazed at the way that she handled it. She handled the situation calmly and approached him in a whole different way than, even I might have.
Let's talk about liability because if Joey, if he's having a meltdown,
Mhm.
he sees a cell phone, he is very likely to throw it in a body of water. So if
Okay.
I warn the caregiver, do not take out your cell phone if you're by a body of water. Don't give it to him if you're by a body of water. If I warn the caregiver about that and they forget, and then Joey throws it into the water, who is liable for that?
I would say the caregiver because, you made that clear. You set that boundary already. And if they forget, sorry, that is on them.
And that brings me to another point of having a list of those things to hand to the individual before the very first time. In other words, you need to have a very good extensive list for your caregiver that says things like that. Certain sounds mean this, certain behaviors mean this. And if, if they phone near water, and they're upset, it might go it. Those are things that you need to give them time to look
Mhm.
at well before their first experience with your child so that they have a chance to warn themselves and understand the behaviors a little bit more. I mean, I've had some parents tell me that they have like a binder. You
Yeah.
can get a little bit over with that in the sense that most of them are not going to take the time
Yeah.
unless you pay them for their time to read it. If you
Yeah.
say, I will give you 1 hour to study this binder prior to our meeting, then 100%. That is a perfect thing to do and a very wonderful way to help introduce your individual. Now, I pulled out a bunch of videos from Instagram and I'm like, this is my son because the whole world knows who my son is. So this is my son.
Yeah.
But that is also very helpful. All of these like little things, a binder is fabulous, but
Mhm.
either pay them the time or
Yeah.
don't make it too extensive to the point where, that they're it's going to take them an hour to read it. So there
Yeah.
could be
So
that part.
do you have anything like a care plan or anything that you give the caregivers that you guys have written up for Joey?
We should talk about care plans for a while.
Yeah, I'd
And
love to.
because I'd love to hear more about what you do. And I would
Yeah.
say what I do instead is and I don't necessarily feel this is the best thing to do. It's just what I do is I pay the caregiver and
Mhm.
I take them for an outing with Joey and myself.
Okay.
So that as Joey's doing everything, I can
Mhm.
explain it to them. And that feels to me it's the best way for them to retain the knowledge because they've actually seen the action and then
Yeah.
they understand it better. So that is kind of my caregiver plan. But tell me about how you put together caregiver plans.
Yeah, so when we go out and do the initial assessment, like I said, I ask about the hobbies and things like that, but I also want to know, do they have frequent mood changes? I have a list of symptoms that I go over with all of the clients at my initial assessment, and then triggers.
Right.
What are some of the triggers? Does this happen? Do you have frequent mood changes when this happens? What triggers these episodes? Do you start crying uncontrollably or get loud? And what causes these things to happen? If somebody has insomnia, is there anything that triggers you not sleeping at night? Is there a background that I should know about when it comes to things like that? So I have a list in our care plans. It is amazing. So I want to know, what are your medical disorders? I want to know what medications you take. Not that the caregiver is always going to be giving them the medications or
Right.
even providing reminders all the time, but I just want to know just to have that documented for the caregivers too, if they ever do need to assist or help them go pick up a medication. Also, with the behaviors that they may experience. So, we also accept state clients. So the state assessments through DSHS are always very helpful when I'm building the care plan because
Right.
people often leave out those types of things when we are doing our assessments. They say, oh, no, that doesn't happen to me. Or no, nothing triggers me to have frequent mood changes or get mean or whatever it may be. But upon reading in more detail about them from somebody who went into a lot more depth doing this assessment,
Mhm.
it will often say what other caregivers have experienced. Even some clients don't know what is all in their state assessment.
Right.
It will also have in there, what behaviors have they had? What triggers it? What can the caregiver do to assist in these situations? And I make sure to add all of that into my care plans. So we are very personalized with our care plans, not only in the way of it being tailored to each person's needs, but I want to know more about them. So I always start off my care plans with a little summary. So, you know, for example, the first sentence of my care plan, if Joey was my client, it would say, Joey is a 32-year-old male
Mhm.
who loves to be active in the community. He loves to go on hikes, and then just do a little short paragraph about him. And then what the schedule looks like. What are the caregivers' hours going to be?
Mhm.
What days do they want care versus, maybe want some companionship care in there, respite care even, and then what the care goals are.
Right. Okay.
So I would put in there like to stay active, to, avoid distress if possible, things like that I would add
And
there too.
you're the way you're unfolding that, I want to remark that for us ADHD parents who are trying to put all of these things in,
Mhm.
you have to categorize these lists. In other
Yes.
words, if you're starting to, you're getting in front of the computer and you want to start telling them all about your child, don't make it a 4-page paragraph based
Mhm.
novel. Like,
Yeah.
what you need to do is you have to categorize things.
Mhm.
These are behaviors. These are positive behaviors. These are negative behaviors. These, as you said,
Mhm.
these are
Yeah.
triggers. These are things that they enjoy. You have to categorize it so that for the person who's reading it, they can easily keep in mind. Don't
Yeah.
expect these people to ever know your child the way you do,
Mhm.
but yet you've had years, decades sometimes, opportunity to understand this. Make it as clear and easy as possible if you are putting together a care plan, and
Yeah.
categorize and bullet point. Don't write paragraphs, write
Yes.
bullet points.
Mhm. So that's actually another thing we include in our care plan is like to-do tasks. So we put in there if somebody needs light housekeeping, I make sure to put it in there. And these are tasks that they do have to check off on their phone before they leave the shift. And if they don't do these things, they have to tell me why. So it can be something like, he wasn't in the mood to shower today, or, something as simple as that. But also, I put in their activities too. Yeah.
I want to talk about ways to keep a caregiver because they come and they go. Now, in
Mhm.
fairness, um, and this kind of has to go into the hiring process, but I think what happens to a lot of people is they come into a state. Now, this is not everybody, but a lot of people come to a state where they have to find a job, and
Yeah.
they don't particularly have a lot of experience or skills that would make a job a well-paying job. So now there's basically retail or service um, to caregiving. So if being a caregiver might be a good thing. So a lot of times they're not even sure what they're looking for other than they need a paycheck.
Mhm.
And that's when I always struggle as opposed to somebody who's like, I love caregiving. It's just it's a
Yeah.
passion to me. Like that's a big
Mhm.
difference.
It
So
is
so if
huge.
you're getting somebody who is truly just needing a job, which fair.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a job. It's like that's not a detriment to have to need a job, but um you need your what your competition is not being necessarily a caregiver for another profession. It's them working at the co-op or the grocery store,
Mhm.
or it's them maybe doing, I don't know, some sort of work in a restaurant or something like that. And because those are along the same pay grades, I'm not trying.
Yeah.
The reason I'm comparing them is because along the same pay amounts is what we're looking for. So in those cases, what, especially if you have a challenging individual, what are the things that you're going to do to keep them? And that's a really important thing to always have in the back of your mind. If you have somebody good, don't just cross your fingers. You have to
Mhm.
be active to keep them super, super happy. And I have lots of good things that I try to do to make that happen.
Thank you.
Whether it's if I'm making lunch for Joey, hey, can I make lunch for you today?
Mhm.
Or maybe sometimes it's uh you're going to be driving today, and I don't even know if this is legal to do, so I'm concerned to say it, but like, can I pay for your gas today?
Mhm.
Here's a credit card, just fill this up and get your gas
Yeah.
today. In When my kids were little, and I realize that this is a real far stretch, but this was probably the best thing we could have done. And so we had a caregiver when my kids were little, that we needed an after school nanny. And we lived in a kind of a rural place of Wisconsin. We didn't have a lot of options, but we
Oh.
needed this somebody to get them off the bus and be with the
Mhm.
kids until we got home. And not just Joey was challenging. My girls had their own set of challenges and
It's
behaviors.
those girls, I'm telling you.
So
My girl's nothing but trouble.
I know. So I had this incredible caregiver, and my husband at the time, he's passed since, but he had to travel a lot with work, and I often had to travel with him sometimes, but for him, he had to travel a lot with his work. So he had all these frequent flyer points and all of these hotel points. So because we lived in Wisconsin, so every
Yeah.
January we would send the caregiver and her boyfriend on an all expense paid 1 week vacation.
What? What?
If she stuck around for that year, she knew in January it was payoff time.
That's amazing. What a
And
good way
it
to keep the
was.
caregiver too.
It was. She stayed super, super motivated for it because she was so excited to go on that, paid vacation.
Yeah.
And it was really fun. We're still in touch to her to this day. And she admits that was a big motivation.
Oh, I bet. That would be a motivation for me too.
No. But businesses do that all the time. They have, like, for
Yeah.
their best salespeople, they take them on trips to celebrate a good year or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. So do that for your caregiver in whatever capacity you could afford to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's sending them away for a weekend or something like that at a nearby hotel. I mean, it doesn't have to be super luxurious, but that was always something that really worked for me. And I know that you have to be very careful when it comes to if your caregiver is accepting Medicare dollars in any capacity, you can't
Mhm.
pat it. Legally speaking, you can't give
Mhm.
them a few more dollars per hour. But
Mm, give
if you're paying for that, those are certainly
it.
your options as well too. Um,
Yeah.
but let's talk about that in that working with state dollars versus working with your private.
Mhm.
Now,
Yes.
how many states is Serengeti in?
So we actually just expanded to Montana. So we are in Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and just opened up a branch in Missoula, Montana a few months
Oh,
ago.
fantastic.
Yes. Mhm.
So do most states okay, first off, this is where it gets really muddy and very difficult because I have people listening to me from all over the United States, or uh, I like to think the world, but we're gonna we're gonna focus on the United States.
Okay.
So not all states provide caregiver funds. Not all states give
Yep.
parents either respite funds or money to be a provider. Um, and it's a hodgepodge. And I am not even going to come close to talking about states here. Um, but I know California is one of the most generous states when it comes to what they're paying for providers. Oregon can be extremely generous as well too. Washington, not bad. Is it the best?
It
No.
can be iffy.
It could be iffy. It's not horrific. But when a state is willing to give parents money for caregiving,
Mhm.
and that is to find that, by the way, let me give you the progression of that. The first thing your child has to qualify for is SSI. By the way,
Mhm.
we're talking usually in most cases, SSI does come at 18 and older. Now you could be getting Social Security for a younger child who's highly disabled, but they don't necessarily always pay for parent provider hours. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Until the
Yes.
child's 18, and then
Mhm.
that's when parent provider hours come. Because basically what it is in those cases is that the state is saying either we need to help take care of this individual or we're going to pay the parent to take care of this individual. So that's what the premise is behind it. So
It's still a process, even for the parents, though.
it is. It's
Even
quite
though
the
they've been
process.
caring for this person their whole
We
life.
still have to go through our
You
training.
still have to go through the training.
I
You
know.
still have to, hit all the things to qualify.
We do. Luckily, we don't have to learn how to put in a catheter, but
Yeah.
we do have to do a lot of other things. So, okay, so in the state of Washington, for example, we are able to say we are getting these hours from the state. We are going to have Serengeti help us fill those hours and help us with a process to submit those hours so that we get paid from the state.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it all unfolds with that.
Yeah, you just have to reach out to the case manager, whoever your case manager specifically is, and let them know, even if it's a partial amount of hours. If you have an individual provider that you love and want to continue working with, say somebody else that was filling some hours quit and you want to switch over to an agency that you know you can trust. You
Even
can say, I want even as little as 8 hours a month to go to Serengeti, and the rest can stay with my individual provider.
right, which in many cases is consumer direct, because consumer direct is who the state DDA pairs up with.
Mhm.
Um, but consumer direct is a hodgepodge of chaos. You get to a point where you're like, is there somebody else out there? And that's where I found you, which is
Yeah.
absolutely delightful. Where and now I'm gonna rein it in a little bit more. And if somebody is looking for a caregiver for whether it's an overnight stay or after school care, whatever, great places to run ads. Craigslist, LinkedIn, Indeed. Obviously, Indeed's probably one of the bigger
Mhm.
ones. Anything else that you would suggest finding ads
I
for?
would say even Facebook.
Yeah, I know. Facebook is a good one to do it too.
Yeah.
Facebook Marketplace, or what do they have on Facebook?
There's some job listing or groups on Facebook. So I know I'm a part of like Job List Whatcom County. I've posted on there a couple times,
Okay,
especially when I opened up the Bellingham office last July. I put on there, hey, we're hiring caregivers. We offer paid training.
right.
That is the key words that gets people to come to me sometimes if they have no background caregiving, is that paid training.
It's a big one. It really is so
Mhm.
tremendously helpful. Okay, that's very, very good to know. Kenzie, I just want to thank you. I honestly thought we were going to do a short podcast today on this, and there was so much more to talk to you about than I ever expected. So there's a lot to know, and I'm sure we could keep going if we had the time. But
I'm sure we could too.
thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Betsy. It's been wonderful.
Everybody else, thanks for being here. I will be back with you next week. Take care.
Thank you.